AITA for telling my parents they destroyed my future when they gave my college fund to my brother for his third failed business venture? I'm sitting in my car outside my parents' house right now, and I'm shaking with rage. I just had the most devastating conversation of my life, and I need to know if I'm overreacting or if my parents have completely lost their minds. For context, I'm 20F and a junior in college. My brother Ryan is 28M and has been the family's golden child his entire life. This story is about how my parents just handed him my entire college fund, money they'd been saving for me since I was born, so he could start another business that will inevitably fail just like all his others. Let me start from the beginning, because the full picture of Ryan's history is important to understand why I'm so furious. Ryan was always the favorite growing up. He was charismatic, outgoing, and had this way of convincing people that his wild ideas were brilliant. While I was the quiet, studious one who got straight A's and never caused trouble, Ryan was the one who got all the attention and praise for his creativity and entrepreneurial spirit. When Ryan graduated high school, he announced he wasn't going to college because he had a better plan. He was going to start a business selling custom skateboard designs online. My parents were so proud of his initiative that they gave him $15,000 to get started. Money from what I later learned was supposed to be a shared college fund for both of us. The skateboard business lasted 8 months before Ryan got bored and moved on to his next idea, a food truck specializing in fusion tacos. My parents gave him another $12,000 for that venture, which lasted exactly 6 months before Ryan decided the food service industry was too stressful. Then came the vintage clothing resale shop, which needed $18,000 in startup costs. That one made it almost a year before Ryan closed it down because he said dealing with inventory was soul-crushing. After the clothing store failed, Ryan moved back in with my parents and announced he was taking time to find himself and figure out what he really wanted to do. He was 25 at the time. He spent the next 2 years living rent-free in his childhood bedroom, occasionally doing part-time work, but mostly playing video games and coming up with new business ideas that he'd pitch enthusiastically at family dinners. Throughout all of this, I was working my ass off in high school. I maintained a 4.2 GPA, was involved in multiple extracurricular activities, and spent my junior and senior years applying for scholarships because I was starting to worry about how I'd pay for college. When I asked my parents about college funding, they were always vague. They'd say things like, "Don't worry, we'll figure it out," or "There are lots of financial aid options." I assumed this meant they had some money saved, but maybe not enough to cover everything, so I worked even harder to get merit-based scholarships. I ended up getting into my dream school with a partial scholarship that covered about 60% of tuition. My parents seemed proud and said they'd help with the remaining costs, but they were still vague about the details. Freshman year, they paid my remaining tuition and living expenses without complaint. I was grateful but also confused about why they'd been so evasive about the financial planning if they had the money readily available. Sophomore year, the money conversations got more strained. My parents started asking me to look into additional scholarships and suggesting that I might want to get a part-time job to help with expenses. I did both, working 15 hours a week while maintaining my grades and applying for every scholarship I could find. I managed to get a few small scholarships that helped, but I was starting to stress about finances. My parents seemed increasingly reluctant to discuss money, and I was worried that they were struggling financially, but didn't want to tell me. That's when Ryan announced his latest business idea. About 6 months ago, Ryan came home from a weekend trip to Portland completely energized about a new venture. He'd apparently met some people who were making money importing artisanal coffee beans directly from small farms and selling them to local coffee shops at a premium. Ryan was convinced this was his calling. He'd finally found a business that combined his love of coffee with his desire to support small farmers and disrupt the coffee industry. He spent weeks putting together a business plan and researching suppliers. The plan sounded more solid than his previous ventures, I'll give him that. Ryan had actually done research this time, identified potential customers, and created financial projections. My parents were thrilled that he was being so thorough and professional in his approach. But the startup costs were significant. Ryan needed $35,000 to place his initial orders, secure storage space, and cover operating expenses for the first 6 months. That's when my parents called a family meeting. I remember that night clearly because it was the first time in my life that I realized my parents saw Ryan and me completely differently. "We want to talk to you both about an exciting opportunity," my dad said, looking more animated than I'd seen him in years. Ryan launched into his presentation about the coffee business, complete with charts and projected profit margins. He was genuinely passionate and articulate, and I found myself getting caught up in his enthusiasm despite my skepticism about his track record. "This is going to be different," Ryan said. "I've learned from my previous mistakes, and I've done real market research this time. I know I can make this work." My parents were beaming. My mom actually had tears in her eyes as she talked about how proud she was of Ryan's growth and maturity. Then my dad dropped the bombshell. "We've decided to support Ryan's business with a significant investment," he said. "We believe in his vision and his ability to succeed." I was happy for Ryan, assuming they were going to give him a few $1,000s or maybe co-sign a loan. "We're going to provide the full $35,000 he needs to get started," my mom said. My stomach dropped. $35,000 was a lot of money for my parents. They're middle class, dad works as an accountant, mom is a teacher, and while we were never poor, we were never wealthy either. "Where is that money coming from?" I asked. My parents exchanged a look that I didn't understand at the time. "We've been saving for years," my dad said. "This is a chance for Ryan to really build something meaningful." I was worried about how this would affect their retirement savings or their ability to help me with my remaining college expenses, but I didn't want to be selfish about Ryan's opportunity. I figured they must have the money set aside specifically for investments like this. Ryan was over the moon. He hugged our parents and started talking about how he'd pay them back with interest once the business took off. Everyone was excited and optimistic. Except the business didn't take off. Within 3 months, it was clear that Ryan had overestimated demand for premium coffee beans in our mid-sized city. The local coffee shops he'd counted on as customers either already had suppliers they were happy with or weren't interested in paying premium prices for beans they couldn't pronounce. Ryan pivoted to selling online, but he had no experience with digital marketing or e-commerce logistics. He was spending money on Facebook ads that weren't converting and struggling with shipping logistics that ate into his already thin margins. By month 4, Ryan was stressed and starting to make excuses. The market wasn't ready for his product. The coffee shops were too conservative. The online marketplace was more competitive than he'd expected. By month 6, he was out of money. Instead of admitting failure and moving on, Ryan convinced my parents to give him another $10,000 to pivot the business model and focus exclusively on online sales. They gave it to him. That money lasted 2 months. In total, Ryan burned through $45,000 in 8 months. The business is now officially closed, and Ryan is back in his childhood bedroom, talking about taking time to regroup and figure out his next move. Throughout this whole disaster, I was struggling with my own finances. Junior year is more expensive than the first 2 years, and my parents seemed increasingly stressed about money. They started asking me to take out student loans to cover more of my expenses, and they seemed reluctant to discuss the financial details of my senior year. I was worried, but tried to be understanding. I assumed Ryan's business failure had put them in a difficult financial position, and I felt guilty that my education costs were adding to their stress. I took out $8,000 in student loans this year to reduce their burden and picked up extra shifts at my campus job. I also applied for every scholarship and grant I could find, hoping to reduce the financial pressure on my family. But something was nagging at me. My parents had been able to give Ryan $45,000 for his business venture, but they seemed stressed about covering my college expenses, which were maybe $15,000 per year after my scholarships. The math didn't make sense. A few weeks ago, I was home for spring break and overheard a phone conversation between my parents that made my blood run cold. My mom was talking to her sister about finances, and she said something like, "I know we shouldn't have touched her college fund, but Ryan was so sure this time, and we thought he'd be able to pay it back before she needed it for senior year." Her college fund. My college fund. I confronted them about it that night, and after some initial deflection, they admitted the truth. They had started a college fund for me when I was born. Over 20 years, they'd saved almost $60,000 for my education. But when Ryan needed money for his various business ventures, they gradually used that money to fund his dreams. The skateboard business, the food truck, the clothing store, and now the coffee importing disaster. All of it had been funded with my college money. We always planned to replace it, my dad said defensively. We thought Ryan's businesses would succeed, and he'd pay us back before you needed the money for college. But none of his businesses have ever succeeded, I said. He's failed at every single one. This time felt different, my mom said. He'd done so much research and planning. We really believed he'd turned a corner. I was devastated. Not just because of the money, but because of what it represented. My parents had gambled with my future to fund Ryan's pipe dreams. They'd taken money that was supposed to secure my education and given it to someone with a track record of failure. So, what happens now? I asked. How am I supposed to pay for senior year? That's when they dropped the next bomb. They expected me to take out loans to cover the remaining costs of my education. Student loans aren't that bad, my dad said. Lots of people take them out. And you're studying something practical. You'll be able to pay them back. I'm studying engineering, so yes, my job prospects are decent. But that wasn't the point. You saved money specifically for my education and then gave it away to fund Ryan's hobbies, I said. How is that fair? They weren't hobbies, my mom said. Ryan was trying to build a career. We were supporting his entrepreneurial efforts. By stealing from my future, we didn't steal anything. We're still helping you with college. We're just asking you to take on some of the financial responsibility yourself. The conversation ended with me storming out, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. My parents had always preached about the importance of education. They'd push me to get good grades, apply to good schools, and work hard to set myself up for success. But when it came time to actually support my education, they'd chosen to gamble that money on Ryan's latest scheme instead. And this wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a pattern that had been going on for years. Every time Ryan had a new idea, my parents opened their wallets. Every time I needed something, I was expected to figure it out myself. I decided to do some research into exactly how much money my parents had given Ryan over the years. Based on conversations I remembered and some detective work, I calculated that they'd given him at least $90,000 across all his ventures. $90,000. That's enough to pay for my entire college education twice over, with money left over for graduate school. But instead of investing in their daughter's proven academic success, they'd chosen to repeatedly bet on their son's improving business ideas. Yesterday, I decided to have one final conversation with them about this situation. I drove home and asked them to sit down with me so we could talk through the college funding issue. I came prepared with a breakdown of what my senior year would cost, information about the loan terms I'd have to accept, and a clear explanation of how their decisions had affected my future. I want to understand the logic behind your financial decisions, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. My parents immediately got defensive. We've always supported both of you kids, my mom said. We've never played favorites. But you gave Ryan $90,000 for business ventures and spent my college fund in the process. How is that not favoritism? Ryan needed startup capital to build his career, my dad said. Your education is an investment too, but it's an investment in yourself. Ryan's businesses were investments in his future earning potential. But he failed at every single business. None of them made money. That's how entrepreneurship works, my mom said. You have to take risks and learn from failures. Ryan is building valuable experience. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were actually defending their decision to repeatedly fund Ryan's failures with money that was supposed to pay for my education. What about my future earning potential? I asked. What about investing in my success? You're already successful, my dad said. You get good grades, you have scholarships, you're going to graduate and get a good job. You don't need our help the way Ryan does. That's when it hit me. My parents weren't investing in success. They were subsidizing failure. Because I was responsible and hardworking, they felt comfortable making me solve my own problems. Because Ryan was irresponsible and kept failing, they felt obligated to keep rescuing him. So, you're punishing me for being responsible? I asked. We're not punishing anyone, my mom said. We're just trying to help both of our children in the ways they need help. Ryan needs help because he keeps making bad decisions. I need help because you spent my college fund enabling his bad decisions. The conversation escalated from there. I accused them of destroying my financial future to fund Ryan's delusions. They accused me of being selfish and not understanding the complexity of family financial decisions. Finally, I lost my temper completely. You know what the worst part is? I said, it's not even the money. It's that you taught me my whole life that hard work and responsibility matter, but your actions show that failure and irresponsibility get rewarded. You've shown me that I matter less than Ryan and that my future is less important than his pipe dreams. My mom started crying. That's not true. We love you both equally. No, you don't. You love Ryan enough to give him $90,000 for businesses that everyone knew would fail. You love me enough to expect me to take out loans because you gambled away my college fund. My dad got angry then. You're being dramatic and ungrateful. We've paid for 3 years of your college education, and we're still helping with senior year. You're acting like we've abandoned you, when all we're asking is for you to take some financial responsibility for yourself. Financial responsibility? I've had a job since I was 16. I've gotten scholarships to reduce costs. I've taken out loans to reduce your burden. I've been financially responsible my entire life. Ryan has never paid for anything himself, and you keep giving him money. Ryan's situation is different, my mom said. How? How is it different? They couldn't answer that question in a way that made sense, which told me everything I needed to know. The conversation ended with me telling them exactly what I thought about their priorities and their parenting. I told them they'd failed me as parents by choosing to repeatedly invest in Ryan's failures instead of supporting their daughter's success. I told them that I'd never ask them for money again, but that I'd also never forget that when I needed them most, they chose Ryan over me. My dad said I was being dramatic and hurtful, and my mom said she hoped I'd understand their position better when I was older and had children of my own. But I left feeling like I'd finally said what I needed to say. Now I'm sitting in my car, wondering if I went too far. Part of me feels guilty for being so harsh with them. They're not bad people, and they did pay for most of my college education. But another part of me feels like I finally stood up for myself after years of being the good kid who didn't cause problems while Ryan got all the attention and financial support. I keep thinking about what my future looks like now. I'll graduate with about $25,000 in student loans, which isn't catastrophic, but isn't ideal either. I'll be fine financially in the long run, but I'll be starting my career with debt that I wouldn't have had if my parents had kept their hands off my college fund. Meanwhile, Ryan will continue living rent-free in their house while he comes up with his next business idea, which they'll probably fund with money from their retirement savings. The pattern will continue. Ryan will fail, get bailed out, and fail again. I'll succeed, get expected to handle everything myself, and succeed again. And my parents will continue to tell themselves that they're being fair to both of their children. I don't know what my relationship with my parents looks like going forward. I'm hurt and angry, but I also don't want to cut them out of my life completely. I think what hurts most is the realization that their actions don't match their words. They always told me that education was the most important investment they could make in my future, but when it came time to prove that, they chose to invest in Ryan's business fantasies instead. They taught me that hard work and responsibility would be rewarded, but their behavior shows that failure and irresponsibility get rewarded while success gets taken for granted. I feel like I've learned something fundamental about my family dynamics that I can't unlearn, and I don't know how to move forward with that knowledge. My friends think I was right to confront them, but they also think I should try to repair the relationship. My boyfriend thinks my parents are completely out of line and that I should consider cutting them off financially and emotionally until they acknowledge what they did. I'm torn between feeling guilty for being so harsh and feeling like I wasn't harsh enough. So Reddit, AITA for telling my parents they destroyed my future when they gave my college fund to my brother for his third failed business venture? Should I have been more understanding of their position, or was I justified in calling them out for their favoritism and poor financial decisions? TLDR, my parents saved $60,000 for my college education over 20 years, then gradually spent it all funding my brother's failed business ventures, $90,000 total across multiple startups that all failed. Now they expect me to take out loans for senior year while my brother lives rent-free at home planning his next business. I told them they destroyed my future to enable his failures and that they've shown Ryan matters more than me. They say I'm being dramatic and ungrateful. AITA for confronting them about spending my college fund on my brother's pipe dreams?